I just want us to be honest about what we're really thinking.
What's really going on in our society? Like,
let's just have a dialogue and move the conversation forward.
There's things that people are thinking about every day in their commutes from work,
at their office, and they're just not having the conversations.
It's not about being right or wrong.
I can't talk about things that I don't know. I can only talk about my experiences.
As long as we're talking about it, that's the most important thing.
The other day, I was thinking about the level of unconscious behavior in our society and how many people are living beyond their means. Working as a financial advisor and just observing my peers, I see just how bad it is. A simple exercise that we used to do when I was a financial advisor, when we would meet somebody and we're going through their finances, is we'd ask them, if you get paid on the 25th of every month, how much money is in your bank account the day before payday? Often, the answer was zero. Many times, the answer was in the minus. But let me be clear about what I'm thinking about and why I'm speaking about this. It isn't a conversation or an observation on how much consumption there is in Malawi, which is part of it. It's because my concern and where my thoughts are when I talk about unconscious behavior and living beyond your means, I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about our kids, and I'm thinking about how absorbed we get in our own day-to-day lives that we don't think about the future. The financial implications of living beyond your means are that we are not saving. And if we're not saving, we're not investing. And if we're not investing, ultimately it's our children, or for those that don't have children, it is we that will suffer. Jay-Z once said, if you can't buy it twice, you can't afford it. And I've always understood that to mean just because you can pay for something, it doesn't mean that you can afford it. If you have 10 million and a Mercedes costs 9 million and you buy it, but the moment that it breaks down, it's on bricks because you can't pay for the spare parts. Yes, you bought the car, but you can't afford it. I remember soon after I got married, my wife and I sold our car and we were looking to buy a new car. And I was sitting in a group of guys and I mentioned, my wife and I in the market for a new car. And one of the people in the circle said, oh, come on, Twape. You need to get your wife a Benz. You guys need to buy a Benz. You can't be driving around in any car, et cetera, putting all this pressure on me to buy a certain type of car. And I stopped and I looked at the people that were in the circle that were agreeing with this guy, that were like, yeah. You need to buy a Mercedes. Every single one of the people sitting around that table were driving cars that had been given to them. And I was the only person that was using my own money to buy a car. There's so many stories that I hear, so many stories that we can all relate to. Off the top of my head, I've recently just been told a story about a young couple decided to get married. They decided to take out loans so that they could have this lavish dinner wedding. 6 months after their wedding, that they had this fancy wedding and all of the bells and whistles, they've lost everything because they couldn't pay back the debts. I hear of stories of young men driving Japanese imported BMWs and Mercedes Benzes that don't have fridges in their homes. I hear stories of people overextending themselves in banking condes, taking out all this money so that they can exhibit a certain lifestyle for no reason. I hear stories of parents pulling their children out of more expensive schools so they can put their kids in cheaper schools just so that they can keep up a particular lifestyle. But why? Is it society? Why are so many people living lifestyles that they actually cannot afford to maintain? I recently had a conversation with my friend Thomas, and his observation was that the reason that this is happening is because we are a generation that has grown up with certain comforts. So we want to maintain the lifestyles that we had when we lived with our parents. So in our parents' home, we shopped in certain places or we holidayed in certain places, and we're struggling to make the adjustment. Okay, I'm fine with Thomas's theory, but that can't be the only explanation, because I speak to people who have come from more humble backgrounds, and in some instances, they say to me, well, I'm the first in my family to graduate. I'm the first in my family to reach a certain level. But even they are living beyond their means. And when I ask, they say, well, I struggled for it. And now is the time for me to reward myself. And I have arrived, and for everybody to know that I'm now here. I am of the opinion that the biggest problem that we are facing as young people is our relationship with money. What is the relationship that young people growing up right now have with money? What is money? What is it for? As a young Black African, all I can say from my own experiences is that I have a terrible relationship with money. Some societies, some communities, some cultures are taught to approach and perceive money a certain way. For me, money is a means to an end. Money is a way of me rewarding myself for this perceived hard work that I've done. In other communities and societies, money is seen as a way of storing value so that it gives you options in the future. I don't know where the disconnect comes from, where we're spending and spending and spending and spending even when we can't afford it. I think, however, the approach that a lot of us have is coming down to validation and seeking it. We want to be validated. We want to appear a certain way. We want to look like we've got it all figured out. I see conversations all the time about, by the time that I was this age, I was able to achieve this. And that's all well and good. But really, everything that you need is actually inside of you. My friend Twape always says to me, your race, your pace. And you are only accountable to you. I think about these things so often because think about retirement as an example. I started working when I was 21 years old. I say to people all the time, oh, I want to retire young. I want to retire young, because it's some fanciful idea that I've given myself about retiring young. I started working when I was 21. Let's say I retire at 55. I would have been working for 34 years. If you take a look at my family, my grandfather, thank God, is still alive. He's 95 years old. But let's just say I'm lucky enough to live to the age of 80. So let's say I work until the age of 55 and I live until the age of 80. 55 to 80 is 25 years. You work 34 years, you're retired 25 years. I would have been retired at my death for almost the same amount of time that I was working. So I have 34 years to make enough money to last me 25 years. I'm 30 years old right now. I've already lost 9 years. So if you're listening to this, whatever age you are, and 55 is the finish line, you have a lot of work to do. Because how am I going to live for 25 years without any money if I'm not saving? If I'm not investing? All I'm going to be is a geriatric with very, very lit Instagram posts. Spending money we don't have to impress people we don't know, buying things that we don't even want for nothing. And don't get me wrong, this is not by any means an attack on people who buy nice things. By all means, buy them if you can. This is a conversation for anybody listening who is at one point or another, myself included, has overstretched themselves but carried on anyway. I recently heard a shocking story about a husband who had started building a retirement home for him and his wife. They have 2 young children. His wife managed to take over 35 million kwacha in bad debts in banking Conde. This gentleman has ended up losing not only the house, which was not complete, he's also had to lose his business. So now the lady was taking the money, not for any businesses, not for any investments. It was just all lifestyle. It was just all show. It was all about how it looked. Now her children have to continue living in a rented house because of the decisions that she made. But, okay, we've recognized all of this. We've seen it. But then what are the tools to break this behavior? There's so many, all of us are doing it, I myself included. Like I mentioned with retirement, I find that asking questions is more effective than making statements. I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine who has a sister who has one young child at the moment. And he was complaining to me about his sister's lifestyle. His sister spends so much money on weaves and going out and she has this lifestyle. And he had explained to me that the context in which this was happening is that this girl has certain friends that she went to university with. They've all graduated. All of her friends have now been able to move into a certain economic bracket. She is now in a position where she's trying to catch up and keep up with her friends, even though her income hasn't moved at the same pace as hers, as her friends. And my friend is complaining to me because he's saying, I'm shouting at my sister because her lifestyle choices and these things that she's choosing to do are now having an adverse effect on the child. Situations where there's no food at home, there's no diapers at home. And he's telling me, I'm yelling at her and I'm screaming at her and I'm telling her that she needs to get her affairs in order, and the behavior isn't stopping. And I said to him, asking questions is much better than making statements, because human nature is that if somebody attacks you, you defend. So him attacking his sister for behaving this way, the only thing that she's going to do is defend herself because she's already taken steps to justify this behavior. So I said to him, why don't you ask her if she thinks that she's a good mother? Right? Does your sister think that she's a good mother? And he goes, yeah, of course. She thinks she's a great mother. She loves her daughter. And I said, okay, ask her if she thinks that being a great mother is irrespective of her taking this food out of her daughter's mouth to go and take pictures and go to the lake with her girlfriends, right? So build this logical statement of if that, then this. So if you continue spending all this money with your girlfriends and living this Instagram lifestyle, that must make you not a good mother, right? Because the way that the human brain works is that it doesn't allow for the lack of congruency. So if she has decided that she's a good mother, she's willing to do anything for her kid, and she's willing to change her behavior for her kid, as opposed to you attacking her directly because now she needs to find out where she lives, because there's no mother in the world who's willing to not do something for their children. And I say all of that to say, saving, investing, not overextending yourself is a lifestyle decision. The lifestyles that we're leading are what are causing all of these situations that I'm talking about. It's what's causing so many of us to live beyond our means. And when I think about this lady and how her child is suffering, and I just think back to what Jay-Z said. If you can't buy it twice, you can't afford it. This is just how I've observed what's going on. But what do different people think about these different scenarios? Am I completely wrong? I'm seeing all of this behavior and wondering why we're doing this. Married people, single people, people that are in university, people that are starting their first jobs, people that have been working for a long time. Are you comfortable with how much money you're saving? Are you comfortable with what your future looks like? It doesn't really matter whether you have children or not. I'd love to hear what other people think about how we are living, the amount of consumption in our society, the bad saving culture, and more, I'd like to hear what people think about why we are behaving the way that we're behaving, because I think it's a really, really big problem. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, at Twape. I'd love to hear from you all. Until next time, take it easy.